So, today on the Continuum, we're going to be talking about the elections in Russia and what happened that made them so they are no longer a free and democratic election, but just a rigged election. And we're also seeing that with the Trump regime right now, they're trying to remove the voting machines. They're going to go after mail in ballots. How this is removing our democratic and free elections that we have had in the US since the beginning. But this is the Continuum. But that moment of possibility was fragile. Economic collapse, chaos, and corruption in the 1990s disillusioned the public. Into that vacuum stepped a quiet, little known KGB officer, Vladimir Putin. When Boris Yeltsin resigned on New Year's Eve 1999, he handed the presidency to Putin. The new leader promised law, order, and stability. Many Russians were willing to trade freedom for security, and with that bargain, democracy began to unravel. In the 2000 election, Putin won his first presidential term, facing weak, fragmented opposition. In the 2024 election, with the media already centralized under state control, Putin secured a landslide victory. Regional governors, once elected, are now appointed directly by the Kremlin. Opposition voices disappear from television screens entirely. The foundation for fair elections is independent media, open competition, and checks on power. These were all quietly dismantled, and few dared to resist. Democracy requires competition, but under Putin, rivals are not debated, they are destroyed. In 2003, Khodorkovsky, Russia's richest man, funds opposition parties. He is arrested and imprisoned for a decade, and his company, Yukos, is seized. In the 2010s, Alexei Navalny exposes corruption with viral investigations, amassing millions of followers. He is repeatedly jailed, barred from running, he's poisoned in 2020, and dies in custody in 2024. Boris Nemtsov, a former deputy prime minister, an outspoken critic, is shot dead just few steps from the Kremlin walls. And other activists are driven into exile or silenced with charges of foreign influence or extremism. By the 2020s, elections had no credible challengers. Putin was not running against rivals, he was running against shadows. So, how do you rig an election in Russia? Well, the Kremlin had methods for controlling elections, and there were a lot of them. Some are cruel and some are sophisticated, but all are effective. First, they had carousel voting. Buses transported groups of voters to multiple polling stations, casting ballots over and over again. Then we have ballot stuffing. Cameras have caught election officials sliding stacks of pre marked ballot into boxes. Then we have forced voting. Public workers, teachers, doctors, soldiers are pressured to vote, often told to photograph their ballots as proof. Results are inflated behind closed doors, with local officials reporting numbers demanded by Moscow, kind of like we saw in Georgia. These methods ensure not just victory, but a spectacular victory. Putin doesn't aim for a narrow win, he aims for a landslide, numbers designed to project invincibility. And we see that the Trump regime keeps saying that Trump won in a landslide, even though he did not. He is trying to project this exact same thing. In the 2010s, Putin's system entered a new phase: digital authoritarianism. First, he introduced electronic voting. Introduced as a modernization, it allowed results to be changed with the click of a button. No paper trails left behind. Multi day voting. Ballots were cast over several days, creating endless opportunities for tampering. CCTV cameras. Installed after the fraud scandal of the 2011s, 2012s, they once allowed citizens to monitor polling places. But by 2021, access was restricted and transparency became secondary. Technology, instead of empowering citizens, was weaponized to eliminate accountability. Elections can lie, numbers can't. Independent statisticians have proven what the Kremlin denies. In the 2011 parliamentary elections, analysis found entire regions reported identical, round number results, mathematically impossible in a real vote. In 2018, Putin claimed victory with 77% of the vote. Analysis estimated at least 10 million votes were falsified. In 2024, Putin declared his largest victory yet, with 87% support and 77% turnout. Independent experts using the Spelunken method estimated 22 to 31 million votes were frauds, nearly half his total. The Kremlin doesn't just win elections, it manufactures them. In the early years, international observers monitor Russia's elections. They expose fraud, raise alarms, and pressure Moscow to reform. But by the 2020s, watchdogs are gone. The OSCE was barred from monitoring the 2024 elections, the first time since the fall of the USSR. The domestic watchdog group, Galos, was barred as a foreign agent, its members harassed, fined, and put in jail. In their place came friendly observers from Belarus, Syria, and North Korea who praised the process as free and fair. Surprising that it's Belarus, Syria, and North Korea, countries that have authoritarian regimes. When the referees are expelled, the game isn't just unfair, it ceases to be a game at all. By the 2020s, elections in Russia had become propaganda rituals, performances for the world and for the Russian people themselves. State TV broadcast image of long voter lines. Patriotic music would swell in the background of these videos. Factory workers and soldiers were shown proudly casting ballots, declaring loyalty to the state. Putin's victory percentages, 80, sometimes even 90% in certain regions, are presented as proof of his popularity, not signs of fraud. The purpose of the vote is no longer to choose the leader, it is to display loyalty, to manufacture legitimacy, and to remind Russia that resistance is futile. Over the past 2 decades, Russian elections have been hollowed out. Citizens know their vote doesn't matter. Many don't even bother to participate. Others vote out of fear or habit and or resignation. Civil society has withered under the constant repression. Young Russians who grew up under Putin see no political alternative. Millions have emigrated, convinced change is impossible within the system. The greatest casualty is not just democracy, it is belief. When citizens stop believing their vote matters, democracy isn't just weakened, it dies. Today, Russians still vote, ballots are still cast, numbers are still announced, but the outcome is premeditated. The ritual remains, but the meaning is gone. Elections, once the heartbeat of democracy, now echo only the silence of control. So, now I want to really tie this in with some of the things that we're seeing with the Trump regime. First of all, we look at his rhetoric. A lot of his stuff has been put out there saying that things are rigged, trying to undermine elections. First thing is calling things frauds. That is undermining the elections. Next, we see that in the 2024 elections, he has pushed that it was a landslide victory. The same thing that Vladimir Putin had did to make him seem invincible. Even though this is not true and anybody can see that, he has used that term a lot, trying to receive the same kind of invincibility that Vladimir Putin sees in Russia. Next, we see the statistical anomalies that we see in Russia, we saw in the 2024 election. Entire regions without a single vote for Kamala Harris, even though that is statistically impossible. Does this mean that the election was kind of rigged? Well, statistically, yes. We also see that he has gone after the fair and free elections that are the watchdogs for our elections, just like Vladimir Putin went after OSCE and Galos. These are removing integrity into our elections. One of the things we'll see when he decides to try and go after mail in ballot votings in the machines is he'll do multi day voting. Because we will have so many people who have to get to a actual polling station, they will probably open it up for a few days. And in so doing, they'll allow it to be a multi day voting. This allows him to do more and endless opportunities for tampering in these elections. If he sees he losing a county, that's when he can go in and try and tamper with that election. One of the biggest issues that we're going to see here is he's going to go after the media stations that give his opposition platforms. Just like in Russia, they went after the people who gave opposition platforms. Because if we don't have an independent media, we don't have a democracy. And that's what we're seeing very hard right now with him going after the AP, Reuters, CBS, all these different things. He is going after trying to make sure that his opposition can't speak, just like in Russia. So Trump went and he met with Putin. We all saw them in the back of the Beast, the limousine for the president. Was he meeting to learn how to rig these elections? That's up to you to decide. But long term, I think that we're going to start to see the same steps that Putin did to rig Russia's elections in the US. And if we don't call it out, we're not going to have elections, and that means we're not going to have a democracy. So, call it out. This has been the Continuum.